Well, we have a list of the experts who back the ICC warrants against Israel. The panel includes international law and human rights expert Danny Friedman, British House of Lords member Helena Kennedy, and British Lebanese barrister and human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, who posted a statement on the website of the Clooney Foundation for Justice. She wrote, "We unanimously conclude that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation as a method of warfare, murder, persecution and extermination. I served on this panel because I believe in the rule of law and the need to protect civilian lives." Douglas, what's your response to that?
These are all more preposterous political ideologues pretending to be cool, level-minded lawyers. Helena Kennedy is a far left-wing career political operative in the UK. She spent her whole life campaigning for loony left causes and giving them some legal patina. Amal Clooney, another highly motivated political operator. In her case, doubtless she will use this to raise more funds for the Clooney Foundation and to burnish her own credentials in some other way. But if you just consider what they've done there, first of all, these preposterous so-called judges and lawyers have done no on-the-ground research, nothing original. They haven't been into Gaza. They haven't been in any of the areas of the fighting. So when they say we find that Benjamin Netanyahu could have overseen murder in a war zone, they don't even know that it has happened. I mean, I suspect there is some killing in a war zone. It strikes me as being kind of de rigueur, and that's why Hamas shouldn't have started a war. But the other thing these people have done is, as I said earlier, Khan decided to go for the one Jewish state in the world. But he waited and did it at the same time as going for, or claiming that he's going to go for, Sinwar, the Hamas leader who planned and organized the 7th of October massacres. So what he's doing is this neat political, I would say even Islamist ideological thing, which is if you can't get through in the way you want, you pretend there is moral parity between Hamas and the IDF, between Sinwar, who planned the 7th of October atrocities, and Benjamin Netanyahu, whose task it is, the unenviable task of getting the hostages home and punishing the leadership of Hamas. They have just drawn an equivalence between those two things. I think it's, as I say, highly motivated, highly political at best. The whole thing stinks of an agenda. And I would just say that everybody who's just stumbled upon the International Criminal Court should remember, again, it isn't what it says it is. It has no jurisdiction in these matters, and nor should it. If it is agreed that these highly motivated individuals can come for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Minister of Defense Gallant, they will be coming for an Australian Prime Minister next, or a British Home Secretary, or an American Secretary of State, and they have no more right there.
You're 100% right there. And then the decision to announce this action against the Hamas leadership and the Israeli Prime Minister and Defence Minister on the same day, it is such a clear political move to put them on the same page, as if there is some equivalence there. It's just transparent.
Yeah.
It is, and it's going to work
legally.
Absolutely. Well, this decision by the ICC has been condemned by Israel's strongest allies. We've had the United States come out strongly, the United Kingdom, but sadly, our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been shamefully weak on this issue, and his Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, I'd argue, has been even worse. Let's hear from the Prime Minister first.
Well, I don't comment on court processes in Australia, let alone court processes globally, of which Australia is not a party.
Apparently he can't make any comment on court cases overseas. Just a few minutes later, he made comment on the Julian Assange case, which is happening overseas. So he couldn't even stay consistent there. But his Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, used her department to issue a statement expressing support for the ICC. The statement said Australia respects the ICC and the important role it has in upholding international law. The decision on whether to issue arrest warrants is a matter for the court. Douglas, Australia's response seems not just weak but unprincipled compared to what we've seen from the UK and the US.
Well, first of all, don't be so sure that the US and UK are so principled on this. I think there's a political game going on here, and the Biden administration would be perfectly happy to give over Netanyahu in order to get a preferred candidate. So there's a lot of different types of politics going on. And in the UK, the Labour Party, who are likely to be the overwhelming party of government in Britain later this year, their idiot representative actually welcomed the ruling. So that would be British policy too. As for Albanese and Wong, I mean, they can console themselves, and certainly Wong can console herself, that she is on exactly the same side as Hamas leader Khalid Mashal. Let me just read you quickly what Khalid Mashal said earlier this week in a speech. He said that it's extremely important to annihilate the Zionists for the good of humanity, and that being far away from a zone of jihad does not mean that you are absolved from carrying out jihad. He says that the Al-Aqsa flood, which is what he and his friends in Hamas call the 7th of October massacre, he said the Al-Aqsa flood must be followed by, and has been followed by, quote, the great student flood. All of those students on Western campuses, they're doing what the head of Hamas is wanting them to do. He said we need a media flood. Well, Khalid Mashal's got the media flood all the way from the New York Times to Al Jazeera. He says then we need a legal flood, such as the incidents and the attempts to use The Hague. He's also said, of course, that we need jihad and resistance and the jihad flood. So Wong can console herself, like all of those wrong-headed students on various campuses who've made common cause with Hamas. They're on exactly the same page, lockstep with one of the people who planned the 7th of October massacre. I hope they're proud of themselves. History will be horrible to them.
Well, on those wrong-headed students, we've seen them across university campuses in the US, UK, right here in Australia. They'd be feeling even more emboldened by this decision by the ICC. And I wonder if it'll be enough to see them remove their masks, Douglas. You wrote about this trend of anti-Israeli protesters wearing masks outdoors, and you've called on these cowards to show their faces.
Yes, it was fascinating to me, you know, Rita. When I was in Australia recently, I noticed that all the anti-Israel protesters all seemed to be, whilst they were doing their thing of celebrating Hamas, they seemed also to be incredibly scared of COVID. A very 2020. Here in New York, up at Columbia, all these students who are shouting things like "Go back to Poland" to the Jewish students at Columbia, they're also terrified of respiratory viruses. Very interesting. Same thing in the UK, where the brave students at Cambridge University shout their filth and also shout it through masks. Now, I suggest this is all bunk. They're not actually afraid of COVID whilst they're doing their bit for Hamas. They know that what they're doing might be shameful. They know it might get them into trouble. They know that when you stand among a group of people all wearing their Yasser Arafat kaffirs and feeling so proud of dressing up in Hamas terrorist chic, they sort of sense maybe at some point in the future, this will go wrong and I might have to account for my presence here and my actions. So what do? I go all 2020 and I put a mask on. And the authorities, in my view, and everyone else should say, you know, in America in particular, the last group of racists who were allowed to parade through America with their faces covered were the Ku Klux Klan. Now, people used to say then, if you're so proud of your racist ideology, why don't you show your face? And it's the same thing with these students and others. I'd like them to show their faces. I show my face when I speak. You show your face, Rita. We're not afraid of being held to account for our opinions. We put them out there like anyone else who's sensible, and we expect to be held to account for them. These people do not. They are acting simultaneously as radicals and cowards. It's not surprising those two things often go together, but I'd say to them, to use a phrase that might trigger them, man up, guys. Show your face. Let the world see the bigotry face to face.